Well, welcome to the program, everybody. My name is Emilio Ramos. As always, we are here for another episode of Red Grace Live, and I am joined by Michael Whitehead, the producer of the show.
Hello,
and
everybody.
We are excited to dive into another episode today dealing with World War III and what the Bible has to say about that, specifically how we as Christians can find comfort in a world that is predicting all sorts of different apocalyptic scenarios. We're going to get to that, and we're even going to discuss that from a recent video that was put out, at least a political take that was given by no one less than Tucker Carlson himself, talking about war with Russia and such. And so all of these kind of rumblings, they have to make you think. If you're a Christian, you're reading your Bible, you know about eschatology, you've got to think about what they're talking about, and especially knowing what the Bible says about eschatology, you tend to wonder, how is it possible that these apocalyptic things can happen? And so how serious do we need to take those kinds of threats? That's kind of the thrust of what we're talking about. Also, we just did G3.
Yep.
Mike and I were both there along with friends and people we know. But at any rate, so Micah, how are you doing, and how did you like G3?
First time going out to G3, it was a lot of fun. We got to sit around with some great friends, of course, you, me, Mike, Todd, and having some good time, listening to some really great sermons. The one that I think that I got to hear, that because I didn't sit the entire time, that I really, really enjoyed was hearing from, good old Lawson, and getting preached to by, I say, one of the top 10 preachers in America in this generation today. So I had a good time. We got to screen the movie Cessationist, which I was blessed to be a part of, and in the production end of that. So it was just a good time to meet up with some friends that I hadn't met actually in person yet, and have a good time hearing the word.
Yeah, amen. It seems like those conferences are always like that. You meet up with people, you end up talking to people from all kinds of different ministries, and you end up, getting all sorts of,
Right.
Yeah, you get really inspired and want to do things and partner with people and stuff like that. And certainly G3 is the place to do that if you want to connect with other like-minded Christians and churches and believers and ministries and stuff like that. So really cool stuff. And I think you're right. I think, I think I agree with you that Steve Lawson's messages were just out of the, you just knocked it out of the ballpark.
Yeah.
The way he opened up the conference, of course, I was there for the pre-conference. You weren't, but we'll come back and talk a little bit deeper about G3 here in a minute. But sure. Steve Lawson's opening of the conference, and he closed the conference. He had the last word. he had kind of the first word and the last word. And I think that was so wise for them to do that, because it's getting to the point where, I don't know, Steve Lawson is really just one of those preachers that you don't want to miss.
Yeah.
And so very strategic for a conference to have him at the beginning and at the very, very end, to keep us all there, having to wait for Steve Lawson to deliver that message, all on the sovereignty of God. What did you think about the theme? Micah, don't you think we've got enough Calvinism as it is?
I don't know that there's enough Calvinism. I think it's all biblical, but it was just on point. I mean, every single speaker that I interact or was there and heard, they just kind of hammered the point home that, in all, God is sovereign, and we as men should be grateful to be maybe those called in as the elect, and enjoy the worship of the Father every day.
Yeah, no, for sure. Actually, ironically, right, it has to do with what we're talking about here today. But matter of fact, what we're talking about here today, we need to jump into. So let me have the first word, if you don't mind, and then we can dive into a little bit more of G3, and we'll transition and make our way into the subject of World War III and what the Bible has to say about that. So let's do that first word first. Well, you hear it in sermons all the time. You hear preachers talking about the problems that we're facing in the world. We talk about culture all the time, especially right now. in the Christian church, talk about culture is very popular. And there's all sorts of people giving opinions on exactly the right relationship, let's say, of Christ and culture. But when we talk about culture, we assume that society is here in order for there to be a culture. But what happens when the culture and the society that we live in is threatening to end society? And the potential is certainly there. Now, obviously, when the atomic bomb was invented, when nuclear power was invented, and nuclear capability was invented and proliferated, we understood very quickly that in the 20th century, we were living in a different world. We were now living in the kind of world that has the capacity at its fingertips to annihilate all life on Earth. And I mean, we still live under that. And, for most of us, or many of us, we don't go back to World War I, World War II. We don't go back to the earlier wars. We don't go back to the Cuban Missile Crisis. Many people don't. And therefore, they don't really remember what it feels like to live on the threat or the potential brink of nuclear war. But today, there are many nations out there that are nuclear: Russia, Israel, China, and others in the UK, and of course, the United States of America. So that nuclear war is something that we just sort of have embraced as a real potential, a real threat, maybe the ultimate threat, the sum of all fears, as they say. But what does the Bible have to say about global annihilation? There are all sorts of doomsday scenarios that are being proposed today that can happen. These are real scenarios that people are actually forecasting as real possibilities. Perhaps it will be AI that gets out of control and ends up destroying us. There's a handful of people that actually believe that's a real possibility. And then there are others that believe that maybe we'll go into a really devastating global war where, again, humanity will stand on the precipice of destruction. And with such great cataclysmic potential, it's always important to look at everything through the biblical worldview and to be reminded about the sovereignty of God in light of the great dangers that we face, even going forward in the 21st century. And so we're going to look at that today. We're going to look at what it looks like exegetically and eschatologically when we think about the scenario that the Bible paints, the picture that the Bible paints, if you would, at the end of the age. Is there space? Is there room? Is there actually a case that can be made for a real nuclear exchange in light of the fact that the Bible has an eschatological program? That's kind of what I want to address today. So we also need to talk a little bit deeper about G3 and what direction G3 is going in, and what does Red Grace Media think about that? So let's dive into each one of those issues as well. We have a video that we're going to play to kind of launch us into this discussion regarding World War III and the Bible.
So, Emilio, I just have to ask the question, why is it always doom and gloom with you?
I don't know. I look out into the world, and those are the headlines that tend to grab my attention.
Yeah.
I forgot there was a concern.
I'm going to start sending you like puppy photos or something here soon.
No, somebody said on a podcast, a 2-ton ballistic missile flying overhead. Yeah, it's a little bit of potential of ruining your day. So
maybe a little bit.
So that might be important that we discuss. No, but we've never actually talked about this issue directly. I've used points and I've mentioned it here and there, but we got to get into that because there's a political pundit out there that recently made some serious waves, making a remarkable prediction regarding exactly that. But let's go back to G3 for a minute. Sure. I don't want to pass over G3 so quickly because it was a big ordeal. There was over 8,000 people there. There was about 8,400 people there.
Wow.
And I remember when I first took a look at G3. I don't know how much you've looked at it, Micah, or how much you've researched it yourself.
No.
You obviously know many of the people involved in it.
Sure.
But I took kind of a deep dive into the ministry of G3, and I was really attracted to it because it has sort of a confessional identity. If you want to be part of the G3 network, which City View Church, my city, or excuse me, my church, is part of that network. And so, if you have sort of a reformed and confessional worldview, you will fit very nicely with G3. And G3 is actually, they're looking to do quite a bit of expanding in terms of their ministry and their footprint as far as what they want to do. They're diving into all sorts of different areas of ministry, and I think it's really exciting. I don't know what you saw when you were there, Micah, or what kind of stood out to you from this conference.
Honestly, the most random thing I think is what stood out to me is just how many children were there. I loved the fact that it was family integrated in that fashion, with the playpens for, of course, on the concrete ground, but the playpens for kids. Not something that you see in big EVA conferences, not in any other ones. And just the fact that it wasn't some big flashy, trashy show of lighting and sound and look at who has the great voice that can come and sing for us and knock our socks off. It was just about every single guy getting up there and just getting into the word and spending a good 45 minutes to an hour just preaching and knocking everybody's socks off.
Yeah, you're right. I think the family dynamic is what makes G3 really unique. The fact that you can bring the whole family, I think, is really smart, because I think it gives people an opportunity to connect with one another, especially moms, families with big families with lots of kids, to show other kids, look, you're part of something really big, in terms of, there are a lot of churches and a lot of brethren and a lot of believers out there that hold to the same convictions that you have out there. And you know what? A lot of these folks that are there, Micah, they're coming from really small churches like my church. There's maybe 50 people there, maybe 100 people in these churches, and they are intent on Reformed theology. They are intent on expository preaching, and they're intent on having doctrinal fidelity. And I tell you what, when you're always sort of towing the line of solid Reformed theology, in a world where there's just kind of a wasteland of in the broader evangelical world, where most of the time the doctrines that your pastor in an expository Reformed church is preaching, and that the ministry that you're exposed to is not really popular, is not really the big thing out there. It can feel lonely. It could kind of feel like we're kind of out on our own, doing
isolated
our own
on
thing.
an island out there.
Yeah, and G3 can make you feel a sense of, hey, wait a minute, there's are a lot of churches
there.
like us out there. So
That's
it's a really good thing.
Yeah.
Now,
awesome.
I did go to the pre-conference.
Yes.
And you did not.
No, you've told me a little bit about it, but
I have forgiven you for that.
I hear it was a little bit fire. Hey, I had some other things I had to do last week, so
just a few things, right?
Just a few things.
Yeah. People don't understand the few things that you have to do. Micah has quite a bit on his plate week to week. But I did go to the pre-conference, and I got to tell you, Micah, it was amazing. Let me get a little bit controversial, okay? Let's not paint G3 as everything is perfect.
You, Emilio, controversial? Let's go. Bring it on.
No, never.
Bring it on.
Never. No. Plain as plain can be. Well, let's not make G3 out to be this sort of perfect ministry where nothing's wrong and blah, 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 right? Obviously, there are multiple ministers there. There are multiple theologies there. There are multiple theologians there with different perspectives on different stuff. And G3 this year, they tackled a big subject by handling Christian nationalism, talking a little bit about theonomy and postmillennialism. Even though I expected a little bit more, there wasn't a whole, I guess we need to be fair, because it's not like you can just go really deep at these conferences in these issues, but they did talk about it. But let me just say that I noticed right away kind of a funny development as the conference began. You had James White, who came out and delivered, I think was the first message. And he came out and he gave a very a basic message about the sovereignty of God, but he also talked a little bit about postmillennialism and he if you really had kind of discerning ears, you can hear a little bit of his postmillennial leanings and how we have to prepare for the future, and sort of projecting this attitude of the church is in its infancy stages and just kind of the typical stuff maybe you would get from postmillennialism. And that's they brought him in, they wanted him to share, and he did a good job. But he gave kind of one perspective, and then the next speaker was Owen Strachan, who then came up and addressed the issue of Christian nationalism and went directly after people that believe in things like theonomy and postmillennialism, and showed how that these things are almost always intertwined with Christian nationalism. And then immediately after Owen, we heard from Scott Aniol, who just wrote a book on strangers and exiles, and his book talking about the dual citizenship that believers have, both in this world and in our heavenly citizenship. And so I thought it was remarkable because you had kind of the post-mill, the anti-post-mill, and then you had sort of the positive the positive presentation of,
wait a second,
maybe a more proper tension with something like the kingdom of God.
Yeah. I thought that the post-mill position was the positive position, but I guess that's not always the case.
Well, then they did their famous sort of panel discussion, and during that panel discussion, I thought it was kind of interesting the way that Owen opened that panel discussion. Honestly, that's where a lot of people were there to kind of hear the interaction on that topic. But Owen Strachan opened the panel by saying, "Hey, before I ask my question," I thought this was really cool. He said, "Does anyone here have a question for anyone else?" And then Scott Aniol, sitting right next to James White, turns over to James White and says, "I have a question for you, James." And he began to question his understanding of Psalm 2 from a postmillennial theonomic perspective. And I just thought that was so funny. But, everybody kind of gave their opinions on Psalm 2. And I think James he tried to connect it to Daniel chapter 7 and things like that. And it was an interesting discussion. Then they talked about what you and I talked about here not long ago. The remark that John MacArthur made when he said the church does not win down here.
Oh, yeah.
And then Owen Strachan said, look, that's actually, it's not just a viral moment for John MacArthur, but it's also a kind of a proper launching point or springboard. Why don't we respond to that? And kind of went person by person. Does the church win? Do we win down here? Yes or no? And I think James White went first, And James White said, look, I said back then, I'll say it again now, respectfully, I don't agree. I do believe we win down here. And then we went through, and let me tell you, that panel had postmillennialists, premillennialists, and amillennialists, and they all had different answers for different reasons. So I thought, if you wanted a kind of conference where it's absolutely monolithic, everybody agrees, no deviation whatsoever, you would not have been happy with that conference. If you wanted multiple positions sort of represented there, you would have been happy with that conference. Now, if you wanted multiple positions to make a case and to really defend their position, you would not have been happy with that conference, because that really wasn't what it was about. But it certainly was to open up a discussion, to open up a conversation about that, because obviously all those men up there understand what's going on in the resurgence of postmillennial theology, and all that good stuff. So it was a good discussion, but I think at the end of the day, there are more serious discussions that need to be kind of had on that point. So, yeah. But overall, really great conference. Also, Micah, the Shepherds Conference is next year, and we have John Piper coming back to the Shepherds Conference with John MacArthur. You think that's the last time we'll see those guys together? I mean, they're getting up there in age.
Yeah, and I was even around some other theologians that we all know and respect, and that was the one thing, the takeaway that I had this week was how some of the older generation that we've kind of put a lot of, we as the younger guys have put a lot of trust and gratitude in what they've taught us and what they've written and done in the past, and they're getting up there, and the mobility is not there as much. We've even heard of John MacArthur, being out of the pulpit for a few weeks just here recently because of being sick and stuff. So it's like, yeah, I kind of do see the fact that, this might be one of those times where specifically MacArthur and Piper are ever together again for a Shepherds Conference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I registered for that. And now what they have available right now is because the main sessions are all sold out. You have to sit in the overflow room if you want to get in. Yeah. You think you're going to do that? You think you're going to do that conference? You're going to try?
No, my spring is already booked up with travel. I don't need to add another thing. I don't need to go to the People's Republic of California anymore already. I know I already have 2 trips already planned for the early spring.
That's good. Well, G3 is going to be doing a regional conference in Southlake at Tom Pennington's church. Yes. I registered for that conference as well, and that's going to be really great. So
a cessationist topic is, or they're calling it cessationist. So
no. The regional here in Southlake, Texas, is going to be on the Reformation, Reformed and always reforming. Then the cessationist conference that they're going to do is going to be at John MacArthur's church as well
in October.
I think something like that.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah, something like that. So anyway, a lot of ministry going on, lots of stuff happening, and we wish nothing but blessings on the ministries that were represented at that conference at G3 and such. It was great. Even at the airport, right? We got to the airport when we got to the airport. Pulled up at our terminal, and there was Phil Johnson. So I got to spend some time with Phil, talk to him about a bunch of stuff. And then right after that, Tom Pennington walks up. After that, Mike Riccardi walks up. And then we walk over to a lounge where we were sitting at, and Steve Lawson was in there. So got to talk to Steve Lawson a little bit. And just it was kind of the last hurrah of the conference there. But
yeah,
a lot of fun. So should we transition over to this guy?
This guy? Are you talking about the awesomeness that is the Tucker Carlson?
yeah, the rogue journalist.
The rogue journalist who has no home anymore.
Right. Okay, so you want to explain what this is, Micah?
Yeah, I mean, this is just a conversation that I guess Tucker was having with another journalist. I don't know exact saying, where he's talking about war with Russia and what's going to happen if we decide to provoke the bear any further with the Ukraine crisis. Because I think that, well, I'm not going to give a political opinion, so let's just move on.
Okay, so let's play it, and then we'll transition into the discussion that he raises based on the prediction that he makes.
Sure.
They can't lose. They will do anything to win. So how do they do that? They're not going to do COVID again. I know everyone on the right's afraid they're going to do COVID and mask mandate. They're not going to do that. They can't do that. If they've already been exposed, that won't work. There's going to be what are they going to do? They're going to go to war with Russia. Is what they're going to do. There will be a hot war between the United States and Russia in the next year. And
really?
Yes, of course. They want it anyway. I don't think we'll win it, but that's a separate analysis. But I think it's a political matter. They need to declare war footing in order to assume war powers in order to win. I believe that. And I think the evidence suggests that's true.
Yeah. And actually you heard one of the guys, the platform running that video, when he said, I don't think we will win it, he said wrong. He disagreed pretty strongly with that comment there. But it raises this issue. When you have mainstream, well, I don't know about mainstream, but independent media but it's also in mainstream. You also have mainstream pundits out there that are now predicting an all-out war with Russia, at least some kind of war with Russia by next year. I don't know. I mean, look, I'm 100% committed to Reformed theology. People know me for that. They know what I represent. They know that I love talking about Reformed biblical theology, apologetics, Reformed eschatology. I love talking about the doctrine of God. I like talking about the doctrines of grace. I love theology, and I understand getting dragged into the cesspool of culture where you're running around like, whack-a-mole trying to hit every subject in the world. And sort of running yourself ragged, running after the culture wars. I don't want to do that. And I don't think we really do that. I only talk about some of these issues because I think they're serious enough to talk about. They're seminal and they raise really important issues. And to me, this raises the issue that we started out with. It raises the issue of whether or not the concept of all-out nuclear war, let's say with Russia, or let's say Russia and then China joins in. We don't know. But let's say World War III breaks out and man is right there at the precipice of total global annihilation.
Right.
The next logical question for the Christian is this compatible with biblical Christianity when the kind of war that we're capable of today means that nothing survives except for radioactive cockroaches, right?
and Wally.
And Wally, of course, yeah. But you know what I mean? Like, if total global annihilation is not only possible, but even likely, in the light of many of these sort of very popular, prevailing doomsday scenarios, we mentioned AI, there's multiple AI experts, and we're not talking about people with a blog. We're talking about cutting-edge AI experts. We're talking about leading engineers in Google. You're talking about the godfathers of AI, men like Jeffrey Hinton, who basically are behind sort of the emergence of AI in our world. These people now turning into alarmists and warning us that, in fact, we have reached the place where AI may in fact kill us all. And that gets us all worried. We see headlines and they're scary and we don't want to read them to our spouse, and we look over and look at our kids. And certainly, let me be the first to say, horrible things can happen in this world. We've already seen millions of people killed under regimes, and throughout the history of humanity and throughout even just church history. I remember not too long ago, I made a comment that church history is a book penned with blood, because it is one bloody saga after another. And whatever relative peace you encounter here and there throughout the course of history, it is not long before you see some great crusade, some world war, some regime being toppled or going out to conquer and oppressing and destroying people in their path. And so we don't want to, at the same time, say, look, horrible things can't happen because the Bible says that God's plan is going to be accomplished. But we also know that the sum of all fears can't happen. And certainly, Micah, that's my position. My position is that when you look at the Bible responsibly, when you have a realistic view of the book of Revelation, which I think is both an idealistic and futuristic and also partial preterist view of the book of Revelation, because some of the things in Revelation certainly have a partial fulfillment or inaugural fulfillment in the destruction of the temple. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But that the book of Revelation cannot be confined to the first century because it's cosmic. It goes to the very, very end of time. And you know that for certain because oftentimes the chapter in the book of Revelation, whatever it may be, ends in the parousia judgment of God, when there is final judgment. Everyone's dead. I mean, at the end of chapter 7 in the book of Revelation, by the end of chapter 7, you've already arrived at a fulfillment of the new heavens and new earth, and quoting Isaiah 65. that God is going to wipe every tear from their eye and all of that, and that we will partake of the river of life. And so it must be that Revelation cycles and recapitulates, doesn't always repeat. As the great John Murray said, recapitulation in apocalyptic literature is not repetition. It's not strict repetition, but it does cycle around. And when you look at the book of Revelation and you look at what I believe to be sort of the end time system of Antichrist depicted, maybe the biggest picture, the clearest picture is going to be there in Revelation 17 and 18. And when you look at those chapters, there seems to be no question that when Jesus returns to destroy his enemies, destroy the mighty men of this earth in the Parousia judgment, we are looking at a world that is fully functioning, that has an economy, that is engaged in global trade, that has a political identity, political system, it has a political organization, and it has a socioeconomic structure. There's no way to get around that. Even when you think about the mark of the beast, when you think about the mark of the beast, that where we are told explicitly that, you know, everyone will be tracked and you can't buy or sell anything unless you have this mark on your right hand or on your forehead. Well, I mean, what does that mean other than the fact that Revelation 13 is talking about the ability to track every single financial transaction on planet Earth? You can't do that in nuclear waste. If we're all drowning in nuclear soup, you're not going to be able to track every financial transaction in the world. And so I think it's just kind of common sense. So let's maybe look even at some of those things. So let's introduce this camera shot. Michael, what have I done here? What have you done? What have we done here?
Well, I've got your Bible there just so that you can go directly to it. We can see it.
Oh boy. Yeah. Look at that. Well, here's the thing. This is actually a very old camera shot. I used to do this a long time ago when I was trying to do all this technology on my own. I used to have this Bible shot, and it was easy because I could tell people exactly what I'm talking about in the text. Now, I don't know if I'll stick with this version of the Bible. This is the ESV. I'm personally, when it comes to more sort of detailed exegetical stuff, I'm much more of a NASB guy. I think it's just a little bit more literal. I think it's just a little bit more critical to the original. And yes, there's logos and all of that, but I just want people to sift through this passage of scripture. I'll give you one example. In Revelation chapter 17, verse 13, to show you, in fact, that at the end of the age, and of course, this presupposes that you don't embrace a preterist interpretation of this passage, which I do not. This shows you right here in verse 13 that the whole world, in some sense, is organized, it's unified, it's gathered together. And to some degree, all of this is more of a detailed exposition going all the way to the end of chapter 18, all the way to the end here. As the fall of Babylon ensues, you have kind of a much deeper exposition of Revelation 16:16, which is going to be here talking about the assembly at Armageddon. Now, the ESV says Armageddon. The NASB says Harmageddon. Doesn't matter because it comes from the Greek word which means har, mountain, and Megiddo, which means assembly. So the Mount of Assembly, and what is this talking about but the place of absolute judgment? It's not talking about the mountain that resides in Megiddo somewhere. There's actually, literally speaking, there is no such thing. And so this is symbolic language of the final sort of judgment event, I believe, at the Parousia. Now, when you get back here, what you see is an organization that is geopolitical. You see an organization where there are sort of these centers of power, because it says that all of these kings of the earth that are given authority for 1 hour, and 1 hour in the book of Revelation is always going to be sort of referring to the fact that there is this limited time period of eschatological events that transpire sort of quickly at the end of the age, right before the return of Christ, whether it's the 3.5 years, whether it's the 1,200 years that's mentioned, or whatever, the little time that is given, and certainly that hour corresponds to that. But look what it says. These are of one mind or purpose, and they hand over their power and authority to the beast, presumably Antichrist. And so right there and then you see this sort of coalition of kings and powers, and how they are united not just with one another to some degree, but they are united with the beast, with this Antichrist figure, which is presumably the same as Paul's, the man of lawlessness, that he refers to there in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verses 4 and following. But you can see that. And what are they doing? They're not laying in, nuclear fallout. They're actually gathering together for one war. And it says they will make war on the Lamb, and the Lamb will conquer them. And he is the Lord of Lords and the King of Kings. And those with him are called and chosen and faithful. And so it seems as if what that's talking about is Christ returning with his elect at the final judgment, which is no different than 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, and chapter 5, where there, of course, we know he will return with all of his saints to judge the living and the dead. And so, but the point to see here, guys, is that even as he goes on here, there's no doubt that the kings of the earth are alive at the return of Jesus Christ. And so then they can't be dead on the basis of nuclear fallout. And Micah, maybe you and I can talk a little bit about this, but how is this comforting to the church to know this? That the Bible has a plan, sure, in the sense that God has decreed all things whatsoever comes to pass, and that no amount of threatenings, rumblings, no saber rattling, none of that is going to undermine the plan of God. How should that affect us practically as Christians?
Well, I'll start with this other thing real quick, and I'll get to your question. My wife always says, "What is old is always new," and so the Bible shot, that's a great thing for us to do. And that, I just find comfort in the fact, I hadn't really thought about this through this lens, and then going through, I think this past week, going through the same things that we heard from G3, talking about the sovereignty of God. It's all kind of just one thing, I guess, this week, where it's like God has us in his hands. God knows all the plans. He's got it all figured out, and he's not going to let
He's not going to let Putin ruin our day. Is that what you're trying to say?
Well, no, I was going to be more disparaging to our own president, but he's not going to let a short Russian leader and a senile old man get us into basically mutual assured destruction.
Yep. 100%. And I think that no matter how horrible the headlines get, no matter how terrible the threat of war is, and no matter how terrible wars, happen and will happen, right? Jesus said, of course, you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. And I think there in the Olivet Discourse, I think Jesus throughout Matthew 24 is sort of toggling between near and far fulfillment. And so there's sort of there is this interadvental period that we can expect that the entire interadvental period will sort of be marked by these characteristics: wars, rumors of wars, pestilence, earthquakes in various places, and that you have these symptoms, these birth pains throughout the church age, and that I believe ultimately intensify just before the return of Christ. There will be an intensification of these things, leading all the way up to his return. And so that we see wars may be more intense, certainly, of course, because our weapons are getting more deadly. And now with the capability, I tell you, I've been watching drone footage that they have now, where what drones are now capable of is nothing less than absolutely terrifying. that you don't even need a soldier anymore. You can just send a drone. It can find you. It can locate you. It can zero in on your location, and it can just take you out. And
with no
it's
human
amazing
interaction,
the destruction that they're building nowadays. And so, yeah, I just think for the Christian, though, how remarkably comforting it is to know that God's purpose will prevail in this world.
Mm-hmm.
That we do not need to worry about human global annihilation when we have the plan, and that all of these plans need to happen. Now, if you look over, maybe we can just do one more, but if you look over at chapter 18 of this section of Revelation, in the fall of Babylon, now that's interesting, right? Because when John is sort of alluding back to the fall of Babylon, he's pulling out of Isaiah and Jeremiah and the prophets, and he's kind of showing you how that all of these illusions. Matter of fact, when you think about Babylon, when you think about the great city, when you think about the city of man, when you think about the end time city that is described here in the book of Revelation, I forgot who it was. Maybe it was G.K. Beale or someone else, but that at least 5 different nations, empires of the past, going all the way back to the Old Testament, even the Roman Empire, are used. The imagery and the language is used of those kingdoms, in a sense, metaphorically and apocalyptically, to describe the final kingdom, the final end time scenario in this final Babylonian system. Now, you know that for certain because when even in Revelation 17, the passage that we looked at, not only verse 13, but also verses 15 and following, especially verse 17, this is taken directly as an allusion back to Babel. So you're going back to Genesis chapter 11 and using the Tower of Babel to describe the end time system. And so, but what I'm pointing out here is that descriptive of the inner advental age, right, is a world certainly of immorality, of politics, of economics. And when the end time city falls, when God finally comes to judge this world in 1 hour, in that moment of the parousia judgment of Jesus Christ, when he returns to avenge the blood of who? Not the apostles, not just the prophets, but as it says at the very end of the chapter, all who have been slain on earth. Because it's not, notice carefully here, and in her was found the blood of the prophets and the martyrs and all who have been slain on earth. So this is comprehensive of all the saints who have died in this fallen, curse-laden world at the hands of persecution and simply at the hands of living in the fallen city of man. Now, we know that the book of Hebrews, that many times parallels the book of Revelation, because it's kind of part of that body of literature in the New Testament known as the general epistles. And the general epistles, whether it's Hebrews or 1st, 2nd Peter, Jude, 1st, 2nd, 3rd John, but also the book of Revelation, there is incredible intertextuality, and critical commentators have shown this very thing, that this section of the New Testament here intersects in a unique way that other sections of the New Testament don't intersect with it. So it's just interesting that way. But it shows you that the book of Revelation is depicting in this passage what Hebrews talks about in Hebrews chapter 13, where we are told explicitly, I think it's verse 14, in this world we have no abiding city. And so whatever city you see here in this world, in this life, is not our city. As John Owen says, right? We looked at this, Micah. As John Owen says, there has never been, nor will there ever be, according to John Owen, a Christian city. That's what he says. There has never been, nor will there ever be, a truly Christian city. And obviously, John Owen does a fantastic job in his Hebrews commentary of pointing our interest and our vision to the city of God above. And so a total heavenly vision, a pilgrim theology. But in Revelation 18, you see that before Christ returns and at the return of Christ, what comes under judgment? What comes under judgment is a world that is in immorality, a world that is in demonic activity, all the demons that infest the present evil age, all of the persecution. We are, in a sense, God, even in verse 4, what do we do with this present city? What do we do with the present city of man? Well, we're commanded to come out of her, come out of this city, get away from this city, right? Which is a call to disassociate with the customs and the ethical systems of this world, that whatever, even the philosophy, the ethics of this world, insofar as whatever is contrary to Christ and the doctrine of Christ, we can't identify with this world system in that way. And so all of these things are going on all the way down to the, as it says here, down to the merchants of the earth who will weep and mourn as basically their merchandise is over. And I tell you what, have you ever taken a good hard look at at sort of the elaborate trade system of the world right now? It is staggering what goes on day by day on planet Earth by way of trade. These massive cargo ships that are carrying goods and products all over the earth. It's mind-blowing. Just one of these days when you do happen to go visit that place that that Micah doesn't want to go visit. What did you call it? The People's Republic.
Yeah, the People's Republic of California.
Go down to Long Beach. Mm-hmm. And go down to the shipping yards and go watch the cargo ships come in, and the what do they call those? The big bins that the shipping bins that they bring in.
Shipping containers.
The shipping containers that are just packed with thousands and millions of products. Mm-hmm. And to understand that this entire global system economically one day will be judged by God. There won't be the day is coming when not another iPad or another iPhone or another gadget is going to be delivered. Amazon's drones are not going to come to your doorstep anymore. I mean, there's coming a day where every last product is gone. And this world system comes to a screeching halt, as John says, in what? In a single hour. In one single hour. And it is the hour of judgment. It is the Parousia hour. It is the hour of the return of the King of Kings, who will return to judge the living and the dead. And all the world will weep for this world system because it's all they got. It's the only thing they have left. When you look at just how comprehensive this is, and the fact that this is central, that Babylon is the center of it all, that Babylon is feeding the whole world, it's one of the reasons why I reject a first century fulfillment of this passage, because especially during the first century, Jerusalem and Israel simply do not fit this picture at all. In the first century, Israel or Jerusalem and Judea, they're in a place of weakness. They're under Roman tyranny. They are not the center of global trade at this moment. They've been decimated by the Romans, and they've been in occupation for centuries at this point. They don't control the global market. And so that's another reason why we can't see the fulfillment of Revelation 17 and 18 being fulfilled in the first century. I can't see that. And again, just the cosmic scope of this very thing. The merchants that were the great ones of the earth, and all nations were deceived by your sorcery. I just don't think that we can say that this is fulfilled in the destruction of Jerusalem. If anything, in the first century, Rome fulfills this imagery. But in the first century, it wasn't Rome that was destroyed. Rome will be around for 400 more years. And so it can't have a local immediate fulfillment in the time of John. It has a fulfillment at the end of the age. And so I just think overall, when we think about the threat of world war, the potential for global annihilation, are the threats real? Yes. Are the weapons capable? Absolutely. Are we living in unprecedented times? Are we living in dangerous times? Without question. But during these times and all times, we have a more sure word of prophecy, more sure than political pundits, more sure than technological doomsday predictions that are being made. We have the word of God that assures us that according to the Noahic covenant, that's right, Micah, we go all the way back to Noah with this. We go all the way back. Go all the way back to the Noahic covenant to remember that God's rainbow in the sky is a double promise. It is both. They promise that he will never flood the world again, but it's also a promise, 2 Peter chapter 3, that he will preserve the world for judgment in fire. And so now that we know that, now that we understand that, we can, in a sense, we can sleep easy at night knowing that when it comes to final, ultimate, cosmic judgment and the judgment of this planet, that is not something in man's power to fulfill. They cannot frustrate the plan of God. And therefore, I actually find great comfort, as a matter of fact, knowing that even while all these threats are going on, a Christian that has the Bible has all the assurance they need to keep living their lives. You know, Micah, you and I, had we been alive during the time of Jeremiah, and as we found ourselves living in Babylon, and we looked about us and we saw nothing but paganism on every corner, we would have done exactly what Israel did. We would have chosen just utter despair and said, forget it. I mean, we've been taken captive. It's over. And what was Jeremiah's word to Israel? His word was, look, have kids, raise families, build houses, start up a business, right? Seek the good of the city, engage in the marketplace, right? As the city prospers, you will prosper. How do you do that? Well, you do that by maintaining faith in the promises of God. And we do the same thing in this time today. We engage in the culture, in the cultural marketplace, not because it's friendly to us all the time, not because it's easy, and not because it's always safe. Many times it's treacherous, but we do it knowing that we are pilgrims and sojourners and exiles here, and we can do it under the blanket of God's sovereignty, knowing that God is perfectly in control. Nothing will befall this world without his decreed will. So I just take great comfort in that. And as ominous as Tucker Carlson's prediction is, for the Christian, you need not worry that we're going to destroy ourselves. But judgment is in the hand of God, not in the hand of man. Yeah.
It's great. I mean,
yeah, man. So
we have nothing to fear because it's all in God's hands.
Absolutely right. And therefore we can continue doing ministry.
Yeah.
We can preach.
Yeah.
You can study your exegetical sermon. You can go to that Bible study. You can go back to fellowship. You can edit a video. You can, pray with your kids at night. You can do devotions. You can have a nice meal. Because whatever predictions this world is making about doomsday, we know that God is sovereign over all apocalyptic things. They are not.
Yeah.
And it also reminds us, Micah, that there's only kind of like two views here, right? There's the biblical view, the correct view, and everything else is humanism.
Yeah.
Everything else is rooted in man. And in the humanist scheme, what you're being told is you're being given a different rendition of history. And you're being told that history is rooted in evolution. You're being told that history is random. You're being told that history is therefore undecided. We don't know what's going to happen. You're being told that history is basically in our own hands, and that the story that is unfolding in front of us is the story of technology or the story of progress and innovation and industry. But the biblical story is completely different. The biblical story is not rooted in evolution, but in creation. The biblical story and history, therefore, is rooted in revelation. It's not random. It's decreed by God. It's not in man's hands. It's in God's hands. And history, what is it? Ultimately, it's not just tracking progress and innovation. It's the story of salvation and judgment. So I hope people will take encouragement from that. And also, should we talk about Prestonwood? I did an AI set, apologetics and AI at what is Prestonwood? Is that, would you say, Micah, that Prestonwood Baptist Church is one of the largest churches in America?
I would say it's one of the largest, definitely in far as square footage goes. But the congregation there's much larger congregations around the country, but Prestonwood's up there as far as size goes.
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah.
And it was actually a great time. And anytime I get a chance to talk to what seemed to be predominantly a bunch of young people, right? High school, maybe age kids, and some obviously also parents were there and adults were there. But anytime I get to speak in front of a few hundred young people like that, it's extra special, because I know that I'm affecting the future generations and equipping them with biblical apologetics, and so much fun. So it was great. So look forward to doing that. Oh, and as a matter of fact, people, in light of that speaking engagement with Prestonwood, we talked about apologetics and AI. And wouldn't you know it, Micah, people are asking me to come and deliver the same material at their church.
That's awesome. That's
yeah.
awesome.
And I'm loving that, because you know me, I've been trying to sound the alarm on this for so long. And so if that's you, if you're out there, if you think your pastor would be interested in partnering with us and having me come out and do a whole presentation on biblical apologetics and AI and transhumanism and futurism, reach out to me. You can reach out to Micah. Micah's got his handle for X, right? Can you throw that up there? There you go. You can.
There it is.
Of course you can. You can just reach out to Micah, and I'm sure he will. He'll forward your information to me, and we can probably get that done. So would be exciting, definitely necessary. So great show, Micah. Appreciate it. I think the Bible Cam did okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'm digging it.
It's pretty cool. Hopefully, people, when you watch this, you can see it. And now, especially on YouTube, you can zoom right in. So hopefully, people will actually find this beneficial.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, that's our episode for tonight. God bless you. Hope you had a great Lord's Day. Till next time, make sure and share this episode, and also subscribe, like the channel. God bless you.
God bless you all.